Okay, good evening, everyone. This is the Rochester Board of Education's work session. I am President Cynthia Elliott. We will be talking about in this work session how the board is going to manage its relationship with the district. And so there are a few items that we're going to be discussing at this meeting, and it includes communications protocol, the board question log, remote versus in-person meetings, board meeting structure, and upcoming work sessions. And so we thank you for participating in this meeting with us. This is going to help our relationship with the district to be what we hope to be, a far more efficient process, and also in terms of how the board works with the board staff and how the board works with the district. Now, those particular topics will come in another meeting, but I will wait until Commissioner LeBron comes, if she's still driving home or getting on her laptop. But I'll begin to have a discussion around this. There are some concerns, and there was a process that we had in terms of how the communications went in the past, and how we worked with the district. We would give our questions to our board staff, and then our board staff would pass those questions on to the district. And those questions would be entered into a question log that was designed by our board staff. It is an amazing document that we have that was developed by our board staff. But we have new board members now. And so we want to discuss how we engage as board members collectively and individually with our board, with our district staff. So anyone wants to start the conversation about, what their thoughts about how we communicate with our board staff? So, what we're suggesting is that, I appreciate the process in which we're using now. There are times, though, however, when, for example, if I'm asking if I need to get information for a parent, sometimes that process can be a little slow. And there have been times, and I have to just admit, because it's been a parent issue, that there are times that because it seemed that the district was going slow, that I've actually reached out. It could be a busing issue. I may have reached out to Mike Smith about, or issue in terms of, can a parent continue to keep their child at home because there's a medical issue, some of those kinds of things that I have because they were an emergency situation and it seems that they weren't getting back to me as quickly as I needed them to on behalf of the parent. I've gone directly to, one of the staff members, depending on what the issue is. Any conversation about that?
President Elliott, Commissioner Simmons has her hand up.
Oh, I couldn't even see that. I'm sorry. I was looking for the Zoom hand. I'm sorry. Commissioner Simmons, please forgive me.
That's okay. I use a melanated hand, and so it may blend in with my background. Okay. I might have to make it the standard hand so that you can see it come up. But I had a question about the question log. Mm-hmm. So I've been going through it to see what questions have been posed over a historical amount of time up to now, just, the past few months, that type of thing, to get up to speed. And I am, some of the responses that I see, I respect that they may not be readily available. It may require additional research or data collection to get that. where does the follow-up information go to after that? And how do you go about getting that information in a timed manner? So if I'm going into new school communities, it would be really, really great to have a pulse on some of the data points such as attendance and suspension rates in some of these schools. And I know some of these things are available in different areas, but I'd love to have a comprehensive understanding of the schools I'm going into, in addition to talking to principals and the real people. Yeah, but am I looking at the law the right way?
Yeah, so the question is, how do you get that? How is that information from your perspective as a board commissioner? How do you actually communicate that you are requesting that information? Is that it? Or help me out in forming what you're—
Yes, because I've seen requests in the past, and then I'll see some where the request or information is embedded into the question log. And then I'll see some requests where information is forthcoming, or it's a very brief answer, it's brevity, and I'm kind of confused as to, okay, well, when is this information going to come, so that people can do their due diligence and how they're supporting and advocating on behalf of schools and students and educators.
Yeah, I think that may be something that we have to include on the question log format. So we may need to include on there a timeline, that we're expecting this information, or when can you get this information, and when are we expecting this information? And then with regard to the responses that we are getting from the district that may not be as comprehensive as we would like, we're going to have to push back on them. And so I think that, that may be part of this conversation, that what does pushing back on the district look like for more substantive information?
And I also think it's also about how the question is posed. So, you have open-ended questions, and you have questions that are very specific. I think if we are mindful of how specific we are when we're asking questions, then there's no question about what we're asking for. And I think maybe we need to have some standard language that's used in there, so that when responses are coming, if it's something that they don't have available, they can, the response can be not available, but you should see it in giving this time. And maybe that's done on some of them, but I didn't see it in some of the spaces that I looked.
Right.
Thank
right,
you.
Right. Any other comments? People want to chime in on this?
Can I just chime in quickly?
Who's that?
Oh, it's Amy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to say I agree wholeheartedly with what Camille has said. I think a lot of times the answers aren't getting to us in a timely manner, and additionally, they're not very specific. I think standardizing how we ask those questions perhaps would be helpful, but I would like to get information more readily available to commissioners.
So Commissioner Malloy, give me an example of what you mean by standardizing the questions.
Well, just Camille had alluded to this just earlier. Maybe there's a set way that we, set types of questions that we ask. Camille, do you want to elaborate on that? I'm trying to think of.
Yeah, I think as a board, we have an expectation to be very clear about what we're asking of someone. So if we're putting out an open-ended question, tell me more about this, and it's just this general happenstance type of question, you may get that happenstance type of response. But if you're asking, and I can't think of a piece, but I'll use one of my school communities as an example. So if I would like to get more information about a high school that I'm servicing, please tell me more information about the attendance rates at this school and what the suspension rates have been. And maybe I'm looking to make some correlations, and I don't see that information readily available. I need to be specific as a board member as to what I'm looking for. So I have to ask those questions very pointedly, not generally. And also, if you're unable to provide this information, or I need to present what I'm expecting. So is this something I can get back in a 2-week period, so that the questions are there and the administration is able to answer and have a cohesive understanding of what it is I'm looking for specifically? I think I try to capture that.
That makes sense to you, Commissioner Malloy?
Yeah, it does. I also, just in terms of then the follow-up questions that we might have as commissioners, because sometimes the answers that were given, they're a bit open-ended, or they lead to us needing more specific information. And so if we had a method to actually capture those follow-up questions and get timely responses without having to go through the whole process again, I don't know what the follow-up process is.
Okay, Commissioner Powell, I think you had your hand up at one point. Did you want to comment?
I did. I guess my question is for the new board members, have you been provided with the school profile books by zone that are used for, well, the parents are supposed to have access to them to make their choices when they either at the kindergarten level or at the transition points like 7th grade, 6-7.
Yeah, profile books are helpful. I have looked at profile books. I also look at the NICED application, which is public facing information, but there's specific information that the district has available, or I would like to believe has available to them that's not necessarily public facing or in a profile. And that's the information that I'm speaking of. And just so you know, Vice President, I do see some other hands in here, but that's kind of what I'm looking for, Commissioner Powell, if that clarifies.
Right. And
Okay.
one of the problems, we ask our questions, but we also get kind of what I'll call it bulk data. Like during the ESA meeting, we're going to get bulk data on all suspensions from all schools and that sort of thing. So if there was a library or a reservoir of standard reports that we could turn to, that's updated each month or updated each marking period. So, that some like recurring questions could just, the answer would already be ready before it even gets asked.
Yeah, like aggregated data.
Right, because I mean, the question, there's some data that's collected so routinely that there's a report or a script, if you will, software written that can pull up that report on a moment's notice and not require huge amounts of staff time to deliver it, simply because it's a recurring question or it's part of information we ultimately do provide to the state, or because it's going to be provided to us at an ESA meeting. So if it's that kind of data that we know is recurring, then perhaps it could be placed in the library portion of board docs rather than having to go to search through, say, the ESA committee board doc sessions to try to find the material that was presented on a particular day. That might be a more efficient use of staff time to do it that way.
Dr. Jallo?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Two thoughts about that. Number one, I think that more information could be made available on school websites. When I first heard Commissioner Camille, I'm sorry, Camille.
Simmons, that's okay.
I'm so sorry, I'm just tired. I apologize. Commissioner Simmons first spoke, basic information about the demographics of the school, how many children are in the school, who's leading the school, special programs that might be in the school. Just some basic information not only helps commissioners, but helps parents and other individuals that might want to write grants or might want to support the school or might want to support the district. Everybody looks to your website first to gather some basic information about a district or about a school. So I think maybe uplifting the type of information that is regularly kept on each school's website and on the district website would be helpful. My second point, similar to what Commissioner Powell was speaking about, is you have a strategic plan. So if your strategic plan says that you're interested in high school graduation, for instance, then I would think after every marking period, you should be able to receive data that tells you how many children are on track to graduate, how many are in a CTE program, how many, some basic, I would maybe gear your questions and your requests to what you have in your strategic plan and ask for that on a quarterly or semester basis. That will give you a nice pulse as to how the school is doing, and then district-wide, how the school is doing compared to the district. And if you're really ambitious, how the school and the district are doing compared to the rest of the state.
So it seems, before I call on Vice President LeBron, it seems as if, Dr. Jallow, you're saying that there's certain information that we sort of should be expecting that they're giving, that they're going to give us on a time that based on time, meaning so that we know that, report cards are coming out, quarterly. So
right,
that's
like you have report cards finished on, I think it's January 28th.
Yeah.
So certainly within 2 weeks after that, you should be able to know some about suspension data, attendance data, absenteeism data, academic achievement data. If you're so interested, how different groups of students are doing, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that information is part of the regular business of the district anyway, so it's not a huge add-on to collect that data in a way that is user-friendly to commissioners and to others who find that information of interest or of value to them.
Commissioner LeBron, Vice President LeBron. You're muted, Vice President.
Sorry, I just transitioned home, so I'm going to transition to Zoom in a second. But before I do, I want to appreciate Commissioner Simmons' questions around data and how we get data, because we do tend to get it in pockets between ESA and then also in leadership meetings at the schools, with the third commissioner being the depending on the school, who the commissioner liaison is. But all of that should always be available to all board members at all times, and the community. This is, I say this all the time, these are not our schools. We are elected to represent the community, but all of this data should always be available to our community. But what I want to add, that this work session is intended to have these conversations with actual outcomes. So I'm not interested in having these conversations and then this is it. So if this is what the will of the board, then this is the directive that we should put in that communications plan, that we expect all of these reports, which reports, and if we're going to ask for them by school, by all schools, and a timeline for them. That's the direction I would like to go. In addition, I do know that the board question log was also discussed, and the answers are unacceptable and vague. Saying things like, I'll get back to you, and Commissioner Malloy raised, who does the follow-up? We should not, I've done a lot of my own follow-up, but I also work just like they work. And so we should not be responsible. If we pose questions as commissioners and we have inadequate responses, that should just be unacceptable. We as a body should not accept that low bar of responses that we have been receiving for the last couple of months. And I will tell you all, in the past, and I didn't even realize this was happening, but in the past, with that board question log, there were timelines. So I'm asking that we reinstate timelines to the administration around when they need to answer the questions. And then if it's not adequate as a response, that we alert our staff to say that's not an adequate response, and then have them have a turnaround, again, time. But at some point, we should be expecting that if we're asking questions, that we're getting responses. Now, I know some responses do require more time, but I'm not convinced that everything requires months on end. I do think that if it's a really comprehensive request that is then brought to the board to have a conversation at a board meeting, and for the board to vote collectively if this is information that we as a body feel like it's important for all of us to have. So none of us should be asking questions just for our own purposes. So I just want to put that out there. But on the flip side, if it's important and it's of use to the community as well to know these things, then we should be supporting it as a body. But
I'm here to say that we should raise the bar and the standard. We should not be accepting generic answers that they have been giving lots of different commissioners as they've posed questions. And we need to give them a timeline. And if this is the will of the board, then this is what we're here today to do, to give those directives today. Thank you.
What else should be included in this conversation around communications protocol?
If you give me 1 second, I'm gonna switch. So if anybody has some feedback, I will switch over and then jump on Zoom from my laptop.
Any comment from someone, Commissioner Malloy?
Thank you. Yeah, and I realize like the protocols that we have in place have been implemented to try to facilitate things, but I feel like they're impeding us in some way. I feel like they've served as barriers to getting to actual information or what we actually need access to. So it's been a bit frustrating, I think, for me as a newer commissioner. It has been frustrating because I feel the protocols that are currently in place, I'd like to develop different ones or a different process. They don't seem to be working as intended.
So that also brings up, the amount of data, and I think Vice President mentioned this the other night about the volume of information that one board member may be requesting. And so let's talk about that as well. What is it that, because that's a pushback that would be a pushback from the district. So let's have a conversation about that. And because if it takes, I think part of the protocol is that if it takes 4 hours or more, we need to have, 4 votes from us in order to get that information. And so just opening up the floor, if you will, to have a discussion around that. Commissioner LeBron?
Yeah, so thank you for that clarification, because I didn't know where the standard was for what required for versus what was going to be substantial. But then I would also then need to understand, why would it take 4 hours? I've said this before. I work around lots of data points too. If my supervisor came to me and said, hey, can you pull up a report on, how many number of children in the city of Rochester in 14619, live and go to school in that zone, I have to pull up that data and how many kids are playing in the neighborhood. That's the work that I do. I would be able to use the databases that I work out of to pull those. Pulling data from databases is not that difficult. So I'm not personally convinced that it's this difficult, especially, and I know that we're using antiquated systems, but there are other systems that they're pulling data from. And Commissioner Simmons alluded to a public facing one, which is nice that there's data points there too that they can go to and pull data. So I'm not convinced that some of these requests require 4 more hours. Perhaps maybe some of the HR pieces, yes, because those could be a little bit more complex. And those should require 4 because we're talking about personnel records potentially and things like that. And we don't want individual commissioners to be in individual employees work record if it's not board related. So I want to be clear about that. But on the flip side, when we're asking for these data points, what constitutes that threshold that it's going to take quote unquote 4 more hours, and how are they providing us with evidence of that?
Well, let me just insert here. It may take 4 hours if they don't have it. If the system can't give it to you, and we're experiencing that now, on another matter in personnel with some, retro pay information. And so if the system doesn't have it, but what happens is that we're not told that. You can somewhat give grace if if we know the truth about what's going on, but there have been times that we just have not been provided the truth on. And I'm not. Let me just also qualify this. I'm not necessarily talking about this particular administration. I've been here a long time, and this has been the same thing with other administrations, but the systems have been such that they have not been able to provide the information. As an example, we've been given raw data, and I've asked them over the years to be able to provide us with an interpretation of that data such that when we need to advocate You know, we have the subject matter experts telling us what that information is and how we can go about advocating, but we only get raw data. And that's always been, I've always felt that to insult me. I've always felt insulted by that.
President Elliott, you know, one other thought I'm having, and I know that there's been conversation about a new system is coming, and since coming on, I've been hearing the terminology of an antiquated system, and again, it's way before even this administration. But I think we need to remove that barrier, and I'm happy to hear that that is forthcoming, and I'm interested to know exactly when, because even as a board member, some things, once we get an up to par system, I know there may be some information that we're not able to dig in, that we will have to talk to administration to have that released to us to look at. Then there's other information that is that should be available, that we can, if we have the right type of system, should be able to go right in ourselves even and pull up the data, filter it out, look at whatever it is we're looking for, and be able to inform ourselves through our own research. So I'm hoping that particular system that we're bringing in, what was it called? Is it
Oracle? Is that what it is, Dr. Morris?
Is it Oracle? Okay,
Oracle,
and be able to filter out our information. If you all could remind me, when is that one coming? Because I like that. I like to know how we're serving kids. I think it's like almost, it's sad that we have like this generation, compounded generations of individuals in the school system. And for years, we've allowed ourselves to work through what we're calling an antiquated school system. Like, how the heck are we doing that? You know, so moving forward, when is that one coming? When is the Oracle coming?
Dr. Morris, do you want to respond to it? Because I also would like to make a request for our chief of IT to also meet with the 2 new board members to go over the schedule and like the same training and information he's given us up to this point so that they're up to par.
I will definitely ensure that he does that. I'm sure he would be very happy to share the progress, but it is an 18-month project, and they are well into the implementation of the selection of a project manager so that they can get started on the groundwork to get this new system set up. So I'm sure our chief technology officer will be more than happy to meet with you and explain further the timeline.
And can I also participate in that? I may have participated in it, but I'd like to participate in it again if I may. Commissioner Patterson, I don't know if you had your hand up or not. I just wanted to acknowledge. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I did have one more question for Dr. Morris.
Certainly.
One real quick.
Sure.
President Elliott, Dr. Morris, you said, so once it'll be counting 18 months once the project manager is implemented. From that point, then the 18-month time clock will kick in.
Correct.
Okay.
And they have a project manager on board, so they have a timeline that they will express, but it's less than 2 years, but they are underway with the work.
So with this conversation around communications protocols, what are we actually asking of the district? How should this process be? If we can finalize this particular section of the agenda.
President Elliott, I just want to also point out for our own like final written protocols that were updated back in November and October of 2020, that they consider a major project 2 hours. So, or a major request 2 hours. Again, I don't know how they're getting to those 2 hours because they also don't define for us what that workload looks like. And I get that people are busy, but we're busy too. And it takes us even more work when they're not giving us adequate information or information on a timely basis. Because now we have to follow up with constituents too. And we have this circular cycle that we keep going. So I would like us to look at how we redefine that in terms of major requests, and we could do that today. There's also a process for how those things are done, and if folks have had time to look at that document, this is how they want to continue to do that. The other thing I want to point out is that in the past, agendas have, because we're committee of the wholes and now everybody's involved. In the past, though, the committees have had a staff member assigned from the administration.
You're sort of going in and out, Commissioner, Vice President LeBron.
Can you hear me?
Your volume is going down. We can hear you now.
No, I was saying in the past, we've also, as committee chairs, have had administration specifically assigned to the committee chairs to kind of be the go-to or liaison, if you will, between the administration around those topics. And that's something we haven't fully had at this point. We do have board staff that support each of the committees, but we don't have administration staff that are identified. And if we can go back to that, I do think that that also would be helpful, because then that's your point person around your topic. So for myself, it's the CFO,
Carlene.
it's Carlene. But everybody doesn't have that in all the committees. And so it'd be good if we could formally identify, this is the chair of ESA, you know, Commissioner Simmons, her point person will be Dr. Black moving forward, because she's all academic related as a deputy. So if we can also make a request for the administration to do that, and that also will help us with the agenda setting piece. But I also, you know, as part of this wrap up with all the commissioners, is I would like us to get the timeline now as well to the administration for when we ask the question in the board question log. First of all, do you all want to keep the board question log? If you feel like that is an appropriate way to track questions and responses. And if not, if you have a different idea, we're open to it today to listen. But if we do keep the board question log, what is an acceptable turnaround time for a thorough response for each of the commissioners?
And I think that has to be like timeline, as far as that being established, needs to be in collaboration with administration, because we have the antiquated system right now, and until that barrier is removed, I think it's important for the board to identify what the criteria will be. So what is considered standard information and the turnaround time for that? If there's a heavy lift in information, what is an acceptable turnaround time for that? And given grace to what the administration has to do in the current system that they're functioning in, being able to come to that understanding. But then when that criteria is clear and upfront, then we know when we're going to expect it. So if it's a 48-hour turnaround time for this, when we say standard information, how are we describing that? So we have to be really explicit in the language, I think, to get that.
So let me ask, I know that Marisol just came on, but let me ask Dr. Morris, having heard this conversation, what's the administration's response to this? And I know that Marisol just indicated that each committee does have a district representative. Now, we may not know who they are right now, you know, because things have changed. So can you chime in on this conversation, Dr. Morris?
Absolutely. So each committee does have a district representative, and we'll be more than happy to make sure that that information is shared again, so that everyone is clear about who that is. Additionally, I want to start with an example and then say what I think is a reasonable place for us to try and work from. An example of this is, in my prior role, I would frequently get requests to get Black male graduation rate or Black male data that was accountability related. Yes, you can go on the data sites that are public and find Black data, and you can find male data, but to do Black and male data, it's a different pull and analysis. Plus, so that takes longer. You would have to pull everything out, and you would have to do another analysis to merge those data points together and figure out what it is that the question is trying to answer and answer that. So it would be very quick to pull out Black data, very quick to pull out male data. But when you start to look at it synthesized like that, it takes some time. Additionally, what I'm also hearing is that you want some type of executive paragraph or executive summary that comes along with the data. And in that regard, that takes some time too, depending on what the data set is. So what I'm saying is in that sometimes when we're looking for these data, where we're pulling it from, it's not easily accessible. In some cases, it takes some time to collect these data points. We've been working within the 48-hour period. Once we receive the question, we're giving ourselves that 48 hours. In that regard, that we are working with limited systems prior to the Oracle transition, I feel like 48 hours has worked for our teams to be able to farm it out, get the data points that are necessary, merge those together to get an answer. And maybe we need to standardize any type of executive summary that prefaces it. But still, I think 48 hours has been working for our team in trying to be responsive to what the board is asking for, unless it's something expansive or something that requires further information and we don't have immediate access to it.
Any comments or questions to Dr. Mars?
I do. President Elliott, have my
Sure.
hand up. And Commissioner Malloy put in the chat that, she doesn't know who her liaison is. And that's what I mean. I mean, it's in the communications protocol written, but folks have changed from when that document was written. That's one. And two, it can't just be the title of a person because the title of the person has left. So we should have something and this is for us too, that to clearly, explicitly states who the person is and their contact information. But there are board questions that have not been answered in 48 hours. And actually, there's still some that are outstanding. I almost want to pull one up and go through some of them and give the public some of the examples of some of the responses, which are, I have found offensive to us as commissioners that we're getting when, it's like, hey, what are the data points for this? These are the data points for X, Y. It's just that I'm going to pull up an example because I think examples of real life, what we're talking about, can help our community understand why we're so lively around this and hung up on this. Because President Elliott mentioned when parents come to us, yes, when there are issues, our constituents, our parents, or even our students sometimes will reach out with issues. And then we're coming to you all as the administrators, the day-to-day operators, and we can't even get answers. And I always feel like if by the time a parent or someone in the community is coming to a commissioner, they have hit lots of walls and are extremely frustrated because they're going straight to the top because they haven't gotten where they need to get to in terms of answers at the lower levels. And it shouldn't have to be that way. It should not require a commissioner to step in on behalf of a parent or a student to get the type of answers and customer service and just care that they should receive from our administration and our school staff. So I just want to say, and I don't even want to say school staff because oftentimes it's an administration problem. But I'm going to look that up. And then I also want to understand when you're saying it's going to take time, define time. I guess I would like to understand if there's a request for Black male graduation rate, what database do you have to go into? And what are you clicking to, bring up a spreadsheet, if you will, or run a report? How many, I need to understand this. And maybe I would like to even have you show me. Maybe you can't even explain it to me. Maybe it's just showing me and maybe it'll change my mind. But I can't see that it's going to take hours on end to pull up something like Black male graduation rate from our high schools. But I could be wrong.
Okay, so in terms of Black male graduation specifically, depending on what the question is, if I was going to pull those data, I would go to the state website. I would go to the L2RPC site. I would pull out of our total cohort report, the Black total cohort, and I would pull that all out. I would have that, and in that file would include all of the locations. It would include all of the genders of everyone. So if you're asking for specifically a specific school, I would have to filter by school. And then I would have to filter further by gender. And depending on whatever else that you want in the query, I need to also filter that out as well. So this one's an easier one to pull because for that whole process should take about an hour, right? Because I've done that many times. You go to the state site, you drill it down, you pull it out, you export, you're going to apply certain filters across. And I can show you how that works in L2RPT very easily. However, depending on the complexity of whatever the request is, it may be that you want additional filters or you want to know which students who are in the Black male graduating cohort are about to participate or have participated in MPK over the past couple of years. Then I would have to merge that with another file that may or may not be readily available because that's not in the state site. So depending on what it is, you have to merge different tables And that takes time depending on where you're getting those source data. The graduation rate for African American males is easy to pull out, and it takes about an hour, just in my experience. However, if I was going to say I wanted to do Black male graduation, students that took part in pre-K versus not pre-K, and seeing how that impacted their overall outcomes in a particular assessment, yeah, that's going to take some time because I have to do some connections and find additional source data that may not initially be readily available. So I'm more than happy to show how that works with student data. But when we're looking at things like financial data comes out of a different source, and that might take them a longer period of time. Same thing with HCI data. So depending on the data source, it may be longer. I can do the student data very quickly and I can show you how that is done. But depending on the source system, there may be an impact on how timely we can respond with that data.
But you know, Dr. Mars, there's certain, here's, I also was a deputy clerk for the city of Rochester at one point, supporting the city council. And one of the things that they were amazing at is interpreting or understanding what each council member was going to focus in on. And they always had, it was brilliant. The team there always had responses because they knew, Commissioner Maxine Childress, Councilwoman Maxine Childress Brown is going to ask about this, right? Councilman John Erb is going to ask about this, and they were on point. This district does not seem to be on point about this. It sort of seems to the board ask a question as opposed to with all of the conversations that that we have had. I'm going to ask about graduation rate. I'm going to be talking about people of color. Those are the kinds of things that I'm going to be focusing in on. And so it just seems to me that we should be able to anticipate some of the information that is going to be requested because it's heard all the time. There's some of us that don't deviate from that. Now, there's sometimes that there's going to be some questions that are not what we typically ask. But it just seems to me that because we're asking these questions and because many of us are out here in the community, that there just should be some understanding that there are certain questions that the Board of Education is going to ask. But it doesn't appear that we have that kind of, for lack of a better term, infrastructure in place such that, you could respond, and not, you're saying that it may take an hour to go through a system. And I'm thinking, well, a whole hour? There's certain things I'm thinking that should just take minutes, So I will just open it up again. I'll just to Vice President LeBron.
Yeah, so I just wanted to go back to, so thank you for the explanation, Dr. Morris. I also would like us to even consider whether the Excel format is the proper way, or if there's another way that we can submit questions that everybody can see from the administration, and it's timestamped in a little bit better process than just the Excel sheet, which also requires us to type it in, send it to staff to copy and paste it, put it in the Excel sheet, and then send it off to the administration in an updated format each month. So I would like us, and I think President Elliott and myself could have conversations with our own staff and look at potentially other ways that at least even allow even a faster process for that, because it could be submitted on Monday from us, but our own staff may not get to it until Friday to upload the log and send it. And these are the little nuances that we need to figure out. Where is the holdup? I still want us to have that timeline. You said 48 hours. That has not been my experience that we're getting responses in 48 hours. I don't know if it's any other commissioners with this administration. It has not been mine, but I'm going to pull up one of Commissioner Malloy's questions because on the chart, she showed up first for me. So I just want to, this is the type of stuff I'm talking about. This is a good question too. What impact would the school closure recommendation impact on the district students placement policy? And it was currently the closures would not impact the current managed choice policy beyond having reduced options to choose from. And I don't think that even responds to the crux of what she was asking. It's going to impact 10,000 students or 6,000 students. And those types of questions. And so I just wanted to uplift that because that is throughout every single document. I apologize. My grandson just got here, so I'm going to go mute because he's crying. He just woke up.
So how do we conclude this conversation?
Well, I can at least say for the district that we want to make sure that we are being responsive, and we want to make sure that we are giving the board the information that they need. So definitely we have district staff that are listening. I'm more than happy to pass this feedback along to the superintendent, and I want us to be able to collaborate in a way that gets the board regular reports, particularly the ones that were suggested in alignment with the strategic plan. And we're open to try and making sure that this communication path is open and is meeting the needs of the commissioners.
And let me just also put this on the table. The question becomes then, do they have the expertise to be able to do it? Right? Can they answer the questions? And if they can't answer our questions, then they don't need to be in those jobs. They don't need to be in those jobs. So they need to be able to be intelligent about those questions to us, because we're not going to accept anything less. And I'm hearing it, and I'll just put this out here. I'm hearing on the state level that some of, there has had to be a return of some information because the questions have been responded to correctly. That shouldn't happen. So move those people out of the way so that we can get the right people in there who can respond appropriately. How do we end it? So how do we end this segment of our agenda? We're going to get.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I'm sorry, President Elliott. I'm going to try to talk over Cedric's toys, so I do apologize because the kids are here. But I think next steps, I guess, are for you and I, President Elliott, to make sure that we get feedback. So let me just say this to all my colleagues. If there are actual other intentional reports that you want us to ensure that are part of all of these reports, that we align that feedback from you all, and then figure out a calendar with the administration and the strategic plan and when things may be due, so that we have access to everything in a timely manner and in a consistent basis. But I also, before we wrap up in that regard, I want to say that the information that we've been getting in terms of presentations, that it's not adequate. And so before we start making a request for additional reports, that we need to set the standard and the bar for those reports and those data points that they're sharing. And we do that now before we move on to that to wrap up.
Yeah. So for those who are listening to you, Dr. Mars, they can't be giving us just anything. We're not going to accept it. So just be prepared for it. And we want it done right the first time.
And I think in fairness, President Elliott, it is partially our responsibility as board members to make sure that we are setting the tone with the specific criteria that we're looking for, so that it doesn't become a guessing game. And then we're like, guess what? You missed what I wanted. So if we're setting it up and being very specific and setting up that criteria and saying, this is what we're looking for, then we've put that information out there. The other piece I wanted to touch on really quick was Vice President LeBron's question around what else can we use outside of an Excel spreadsheet. I think we could also take a look at something really, really simple, doesn't have to be reinvented within the Microsoft's Office suite. There's some pieces that they're not as antiquated, that's gonna be my word for the day, is the Excel. But there's different pieces that we can live inside of and ask those questions where we all see them in real time and see as the responses build out. So I want to just take a look and see what we have available in there as a board and within that suite, and then see if that's something that we can pull out and identify to use. So
to your point, Commissioner Simmons, that's absolutely correct. But many of us are not subject matter experts when it comes to education. So right. I would also want the administration to be able to provide that anecdotal information that would also help us, because here again, this community is going to jack us. Mm-hmm. Doesn't jack the administration, it jacks us. And so we need to make sure that, if they've got some anecdotal information that's going to help us to educate our kids, that's going to help us to make these kids career and college ready, I would like for them to provide that information as well. So, and I want us all to be on the same page when it comes to this, because, we're supposed to be here for our children. So we will get together, Vice President LeBron, and sort of finalize this part of the agenda, the communications protocol. And so if there's any other things that you think of after this meeting, please reach out to myself and Commissioner LeBron, and we'd be glad to accept other suggestions. Thank you. So the next item of the agenda, we sort of talked about the board question log, but we probably need to have some, what is it that we want to finalize on this? Now, we talked about that there was a timeline, or there is a timeline, or it's not filled out. So what is this board requested? I think we need to, make sure that we have a timeline, but I'll open it up for further discussion. So we want a timeline.
Yeah.
We were given some timelines for some things, but we want that to be for every request that we're making, that we need to have a timeline. Now, are we asking for it to Dr. Morris's point? She had indicated that the 48 hours is when we're trying to turn it around. Do we want to continue to say that it is 48 hours for certain things, and maybe if there's some requests that may take longer than 48 hours, how do we want to present this to the district? What do we want this to be in terms of our own process? Is 48 hours good for basic request?
President Elliott, if I could, I
Sure.
would say yes, but if I go to the board question log, there's still a bunch of questions not answered at all. So again, you can say 48 hours on record, but our experience, if we go right now, there are still questions that have no answers, or the response is like, this is too long of a request, which at that point should trigger that it needs to go back to a full board conversation so that that board member can get the support of the rest of the board, and we can keep things moving, and then figure out what that timeline would be at that time when the board member gets to 4 votes. It's going to take us, we need a week to complete that request because it's going to require lots of data points, but we don't even have 48 hours. So
yeah, so I guess what is being said is that it should be 48 hours. Are we, whether or not they're doing it, at least at this point, are we agreeable that it should be for small matters 48 hours? And are we talking about, to your point, Commissioner LeBron, are you talking about maybe a week for those items that may take longer than 48 hours, that may be a little bit more in depth, that the request is a little bit more in depth? Are we saying a week? So I'm talking about some specific timelines.
yeah, can I also propose that we're adults too. And can we propose that this is my request? This is of an urgent matter because it involves a parent, or or even a staff. We have lots of staff that do come to us with concerns, versus like just a generic question that is more kind of like, I need this information for a future decision thought process, that we identify that we need this within 24 hours, 48 hours, or 5 days is acceptable if it's a longer term. I don't know, I'm just doing it out there. I just feel like there are things, like you mentioned earlier, that do require a quicker response time versus other things that could wait 5 days. I may not need it right now, but I still want the information to make a decision in the future.
And what that also brings up, I've had experiences in the past when I have made a request, particularly when it's come around a parent issue, that it may be that the staff member is out, right? That a staff member may be out, which would impede us getting the information. However, that should maybe be the exception, because there should be some alternative processes in place that do not prevent me from getting information that I need for our families. So I don't want it to be that, this person is out. In other words, that this is the only person that can respond to the subject at hand. And so I will just, share that with, ask that Dr. Morris captures that, you know, and the other district staff that may be listening, because it has to be more, it has to be more than one subject matter expert. Dr. Jallo?
I 100% agree with that. This district is too large and too complex to depend on one person providing an answer, and only one person. But aside from that, I wanted to pose a question about, are all questions supposed to be answered? All and every and any question from any board member should be answered? Are there any limits? Are there any parameters? Is there a need for consensus in any way? Or can anybody ask anything that they feel like at any time and expect a 48-hour return answer?
You got an example of that, Dr. Jallo?
No, I'm just asking it because if that, I'm envisioning if it's that open, that it could get into a point where you're paying administration to answer your questions and not getting to the work of actually what they're here to do. Not to say they're not here to answer those questions, but they may be overwhelmed with that kind of work versus doing the actual work of servicing schools and students in those schools. So I was just wondering, are there any questions, you know, like sometimes people might be asking questions that are only to their interests or only for their particular area of interest, I'll put it that way. And I'm not making a judgment one way or the other. I'm just wondering, is that question, are you willing to have administration spend whatever time, energy, effort on that question when it's only for the betterment or the interest of one person? Does that matter at all?
I'm thinking that the questions need to pertain to our board goals. They need to pertain to the state monitor's plans. They need to pertain to the strategic plan of the district. So that's my thought, that these questions need to be around, you know, those particular items. So if they're around those items, you know, I don't have an issue with it. And I'm trying to think of, you know, what question may be. And of course, you know, you do have, you know, there are times when there are politicians who want to, you know, ask, you know, whatever the governmental body is for some information, you know, for their own personal purposes, you know. And if that's the case, you know, I would say push back on that. Commissioner, Vice President LeBron?
I'm juggling here, but what I would say though is that if the administration, Dr. Jallo, reviews the question and feels like this was going to require more than 48 hours or more work, in the past, administration has said this is really like a massive undertaking and should require 4 votes or more. And we've had discussions as a board and said, okay, this doesn't pertain to the work. It's not pertaining to a decision we need to make. And so we're not going to support it, and it required 4 votes. The communication plans does kind of allure to the current communication plans to what that would, some of the parameters around that. But I am more than open as the commissioner to hear from the administration some parameters that they would like for us to have as an understanding, and then we can have that negotiation with them around that. Because my experience in the past, administration will push back on asking for certain points just because they don't want to give it to us, not because it doesn't pertain to the work. They just don't want to give it to us. They don't want us to know. So I think I'm open to the negotiations piece, having them give us some additional points on that. But, I just say that because I want us to also be mindful that we will push back if it appears that you're also trying to, as Commissioner Malloy mentioned already, intentionally not give us good data or allure us to not just sharing what we need to know.
So we are pretty, are we sort of in consensus about questions being asked from the perspective of the strategic plan, our own board goals, and the state monitors plans? Or is that something that we are, that questions emanate from those documents? Is there any other that you all think that they should come from? Commissioner Malloy, I sort of see your mouth sort of getting ready to.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that because
I know that there are certain decisions that we have to make sometimes that aren't directly related necessarily to our board goals. And as much as we'd like to tie everything together, like for instance, I'll give an example. I needed some charter school information from finance, and I asked the question, you know, what percent or what is the amount of money that we've been giving in terms of special education costs to charter schools over the years? And it became a matter of it was going to take too long to get that data for me because I was looking for trends over time, not just 1 or 2 years. I wanted, you know, 10 years worth of information. And I get that that takes a long time. That's not necessarily directly related to our strategic goal or goals this year. But I think that those types of, or that type of data is critical for us to have as commissioners as we start long-term or long-range planning for the infrastructure of our district. So I was frustrated that I couldn't get that, especially with a lot of the state monitor's recommendations regarding an administrator for charter schools. I wanted to see all of that information and have a better understanding of it. So I think it's not always directly related, maybe the questions to the strategic plan or our board goals.
So let me push back on you, Commissioner Malloy, you push back on me. But why would you want to have that data if it's not related to our goals or the state monitor's plan or the strategic plan? Why would you need that? Help us to understand that better.
I think it's on the periphery of it. It's not that it's not related, it's on the periphery. But one of, I guess you could say, a long-term goal is to improve our district's finances. It's related in that way.
Okay.
But we're also trying to recreate our district's infrastructure by restructuring, looking at neighborhood schools, looking at placement. There's so much that we need to do, and that type of information, if we're asking for it, is going to help us along the way.
Commissioner Powell?
Yeah, thank you for noticing. I was trying to get in here. Here's the thing about that particular question. When the administration is presenting us with proposals for, you know, for our footprint, for redesign, and they don't have those answers before we ask them, I have to really question the depth of the research that went into their proposals. There's some things that they just already should know, and it should be part of the fabric of the decision making, whether we see that or not. I think that asking the question only reveals that they haven't done the homework. And if the same question had been asked and said, and the answer came back, yes, we have it, here's a graph for you. I think a lot fewer questions would get asked, because then we'd have a sense that they really have done their homework and they know the background of that they're presenting to us. We know that what they're presenting to us then is sound and grounded in data. It's because we don't have confidence that that is the case that we end up having to keep on asking these questions. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about the communications law? So we will put all of the comments together, and we will come back to you with a document or with what we've discussed. And it looks like what I'm hearing is 48 hours may be sufficient time for some questions, some basic questions. We're talking about a 24-hour turnaround time if there's some emergency things, like if there are some parent issues, is what I'm hearing, that we're expecting it to be in 24 hours. We also talked about, if it cannot be that work gets stopped because someone is not present. That we've got to make sure that even when that person is out for whatever reason, that there's still some backup personnel that can respond to the request. And then we talked about, long-term being about a week or so. And then to Commissioner Malloy's point, we talked about, there may be some, ancillary questions. Am I using the right term there? That we may need to, that there may be a request that is made. What I would ask though is that be explained. If it's out, out of the alignment of the board goals, of the state monitors plans, of the strategic plans, that there be some rationale as to why the request is being made. And I think that because everybody, all of us are working off of those plans. And so we need to, have more clarity about why that request is being made. Is that fair to everybody? Does that sound good? All right. Does that sound good, Commissioner VP?
Yes.
All right. So we'll move on to remote versus in-person meetings.
I'm sorry, President Elliott, before we move on there, we had 3 bullet points under the communications protocol. And
Okay.
one of them was just board member communications with school administration and board liaisons for school visits. So if you want to touch on that.
Oh, yep. I'm looking at the board doc agenda. So what was the first one you mentioned?
I'm going to reread it. It's board member communication with school administration and board liaisons for school visits. Okay.
So the board member communication to our staff. What's the thought around that? We had some conversation around the fact that board members just showing up may contact Mike Smith about a bus issue, with say a student missing the bus or something, parent calling me about needing transportation. And so and one of the things that when I'm visiting schools, I just for me, I was letting Leslie know, but Marisol was also interested in knowing too. And, I had no problem with letting them know when I would go into a building. I do know one thing, that when if a commissioner enters those buildings, a couple of things. One, I would say what I'm pleasantly surprised to know is that schools want us in their buildings. So that's wonderful that they want us in our building. But at the same time, I want to give the schools time, to prepare, for my visit, and they know that you're in the building. Word gets around real fast that there's a school board commissioner in the building. And just an example of that, there was a little elementary school's boy who said, well, there's this tall brown lady in the building, so they know. And let's just open it up for some conversation around that. What's your thought?
I think that school visits, well, for me, I've been invited on some schools have reached out directly and sent, hey, we'd love to see you. Can you come for a visit? And then what I've done as a commissioner, because I look at school visits like going to someone's house. Some people have open door policy, like you can just show up whenever you want and knock on the door. If you come to my house personally, unannounced, I'm not answering the door. And it may not be because I don't want to see you in that moment, but I wasn't prepared. And I think it's just proper etiquette. That's just my thought process. Interrupt that time at all. So that's just my thought process on it. Give a heads up, set a protocol, do it that way.
Okay, I'll get to you in a minute, Commissioner Patterson. Commissioner Malloy?
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say that I have found that all of the building principals have just been and leaders have been so gracious in welcoming us into the building. They love having commissioners there. But I always email in advance because I just can't imagine just showing up at a building and not giving people an advance warning of something. It catches people off guard, and people are busy. You got to respect their schedules, and there's a lot to do to run a building. So, I usually have some pretty specific timelines that I have to meet just with my own school schedule. But yeah, just as Camille was saying, it's really critical that that we're there first of all, but that we give them some heads up, and that's where the magic is happening. So I want to say kudos to the entire district and all the staff members, whether it's cafeteria employees or bus drivers, have been so willing to engage in conversations on those visits. So thank you, everyone.
Commissioner Patterson?
Yeah, I've reached out to, I think, 6 out of 7 principals so far, or the schools, I'll just say, in programs that I'm overseeing. And every either director or principal has indicated they have no problem with an open door policy. Come anytime you want, Commissioner Patterson, you don't have to call ahead. This is coming from them, not from me. Also, it gives you an opportunity as a commissioner to truly see how that either program or those schools are operating and functioning in real time. So if you make a phone call to me, of course, I'm going to make sure, you know, my school is, my teachers are warned and, or advised, a better word. So I'll try to keep my police jargon out of this conversation. It gives them an opportunity to function and operate in a way that isn't normal throughout the course of the day. Maybe there's kids roaming the halls or something like that. I think at least the either directors or principals I've spoken with are welcome to any ideas that, you know, I might have, you know, to help them. And if not, take things back to the board, you know, to make a decision on certain things. But I think my point is, without rambling on, is that the schools and the programs that I'm overseeing, they welcome an open door policy where you don't have to call ahead, just come on in at any point in time. And I've been asked to come in and read, you know, to, you know, students and things of that nature. So yes, I do have the time. I understand that some of you are working, you have jobs during the day, which I respect, but I'm open to that. So they're open to me, opening their door to me and just coming in at any point in time and just sitting down and having a conversation.
Yeah, and I should have said that too, because I have that same experience where, you know, principals have said the same thing. Just for me, I prefer to plan it just because with my schedule and what have you. But I've come to, you know, I remember I was seeing this nursing program on West Ridge Road that had the Rochester City School District on it. And I would pass by there all the time. And so I just decided to drop in there to introduce myself and to find out what more that they were doing. There's a school on Lake Avenue. I'm the liaison to Charlotte, but there's a school, I think it's 42, that I had never, you know, been in. And so I sort of just stopped in there. Particularly, there was a family, someone had passed away, and I stopped in there. So yeah, you're right, Commissioner Patterson, they do have open door policies where, you know, they are, I really do appreciate that they just allowing us to come in and that they want us in the buildings. Commissioner LeBron? Vice President LeBron? I'm gonna get it right one of these days.
That's okay. I don't care, President. So a couple of things. One, I want to echo what Commissioner Simmons and actually Commissioner Powell also put in the chat around being disruptive to the classroom. And I think for formalities, yeah, our principals are great. They're like, yeah, come anytime. And they really genuinely mean that. But on the flip side of that, it's not really come anytime. And I also want to correct some language that was used in terms of we're not managing or overseeing these schools. We're board liaisons, and really our role should be to build relationships with our principals in our schools so that, yes, when we're having these conversations, especially like school closures, we can say, you know, I know my school community, and this is, you know, be the best advocates that we can for them. And especially during budget season, because that's often when these conversations are going to be the most critical to have those relationships. So I just want our community to know we're not managers or supervisors of y'all schools. We are y'all community liaisons, or board liaisons, and it's done intentionally so that we can all spread this work, you know, equally, so that if I'm a parent at school 15 and I have an issue, you know, I'm also the liaison for school 15, but I'll give example for school 7. I'm a parent at school 7. I have an issue. They know that they can come to me, which I am going to request at this time we update our website, because our website has both old chiefs and board liaisons on our school profile. So I know that the administration is listening. If you can fix that today, by this weekend, that would be wonderful. But the other piece is alerting board liaisons that you're visiting their schools, because it does put our principals in an awkward position, because even though we're the board liaison to a school, we're still a body of 7 and the power is in 4. So I just want to, the power is in the body of the board. As individuals, we really don't have more power over one person over another in that regard to schools. And so I would ask that if you're visiting a school, that you do notify the board liaison. I will tell everybody now, myself and President Elliott have been having conversations about visiting every school, every program. By the end of this year, we're going to try to go together as often as we can. Sometimes we may not be able to because of our own schedules, but we are going to be going to all the schools, and I just want to let everybody know that now. But it's also good to let the administration know, because at the end of the day, we are a board that hires a superintendent to oversee schools. And we don't oversee schools, the superintendent oversees schools. And so we're not the direct supervisor of any of our employees in the district. We are the direct supervisor of the superintendent and our legal, our own legal, not the legal department, our general counsel. So just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Commissioner Patterson, is that, you have another question?
Yes.
Go ahead,
So
Commissioner.
I just want to make sure that, what I'm saying is clear also. We are into building relationships, with these either principals or directors in these schools. And depending on, what schools you have, what type of relationship you have with that principal, that administrator, or that director. So we're all adults here. We all have our own schools, our own programs. My thought is that we should be able to build those relationships and allow those principals, if they feel that, we don't have to call ahead, that we can just walk in the door like we're part of that team. So we're there really to support them and be a part of their team and whatever they need. We're
So
not there to be a dictator, or we're not there to, govern what they're doing during that day that we're there, or that time period that we're there. We're there to say, what can I do to support you? What can I do to be part of the team? Just because my thought is, just because we're a commissioner doesn't say we can't sit down and read a story for someone K through 6. We need, at least I feel as a commissioner, that I don't want them thinking that, it's just a commissioner walking in the door. I want them to think when I walk in there that he's a partner too with us, and that he wants to do whatever he can do to help get our school out of receivership, or increase graduation rates, or college preparedness, ready and preparedness.
So it seems as if we've got a couple of thoughts, strands of thoughts here with regard to, some of us, prefer to, contact our schools in advance, and some, to Commissioner Patterson's point, because I've had the experience as well. There's some, schools that, okay with having us to, just to show up, come anytime, And so it seems that we've got a couple of thoughts there. Commissioner Simmons?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, and I love that thought, James, or Commissioner Patterson. I think that's really important that we are part of the school communities and serving. I can't community I've served in. I've worked around the district for years, so I actually served inside a number of high schools over the years. And one thing I can say is the courtesy is probably well welcomed. And even managing certain programs, even though I had folks that worked directly with students in the school, our standard practice was making sure that we were not grabbing students outside of class, not saying that that's anything that we're doing here, but that we're not interrupting instruction time. Again, I want to just emphasize that when students, especially when we're looking at the rates and outcomes of this district, we just want to be mindful of the minimizing how much time or pop-up we're doing and making sure that that pop-up, if you will, does not interrupt classroom instruction. But if it's story time and you pop up, then I have nothing to say about that. But for myself personally, I want to make sure I'm not interrupting the instruction, and then I can only imagine what our school buildings are going through during the day with all the information. But serving is a whole nother ballgame. Thank
Well,
you.
let me reply to that, because being a teacher, being a certified teacher in New York State, being in the classroom, just finished up a stint, over in Canandaigua, I never saw it that way. If anything, I wanted the principal or administrator to come through to see exactly what I was doing. Maybe he or she could utilize something to help other teachers, that were having difficulties in their room. I had one issue from September until just recently, January, when I ended my contract teaching, one incident. And when they came in the classroom to see exactly what I was doing, how I was doing, and how I was teaching, and they wanted to use that in professional development. So as far as being distracting or
Yeah, I think you're taking what I'm saying out of context. So let me just leave this last point here, and then I'm going to digress from the conversation. What I am saying is that however you govern or work with the school communities that you serve, that I will digress on that point and allow the full board to come up with how we want to move forward. My 2 cents is that we are mindful of impeding on classroom instruction time and mindful of the school administration and the responsibilities that they have during the day. I think that's fair, that's clear, that's concise, and that makes a lot of sense. Other than that, I'm not here to determine if people want you there or not. I'm just saying be mindful of interrupting instruction and interrupting the school day flow, because we've got a lot of work to do in this community and a lot of work to do in this district. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
And if there's some classes that have that issue, we'll hear about it. So just want to put that out there. Vice President LeBron.
Yeah, I have my hands full for real. I just want to say though, that this is not kind of vague. This is RCSD, and I do want to respect our staff. And that does not mean that if you have a good relationship, I have an excellent relationship with my principals and other principals too, even though I'm not their school liaison. And I go hard for my schools, but the school community in general. So that does not mean that I want to impede on them, because I know that they're also being gracious when I've just pop up. I do, like Commissioner McGoy mentioned earlier, I do also email my principals just to give them a heads up, and also ask them if that's a time that doesn't work for them, because they also may have other, staff meetings or other responsibilities that are happening that I may not be aware. I don't have access to their calendar. And I do want to highlight something that our deputy, Dr. Black, mentioned. She said school leaders should have the opportunity to plan for a sit-down conversation, and if visits are pop-up, then they should be done with the idea that they shouldn't have to stop their day to entertain. And I just wanted to uplift that, because it goes to what Commissioner Simmons is also talking about. I would never want to disrupt the classroom because, someone feels obligated to take me, and now I'm interrupting a teacher. That is where I would personally not want to put a staff member in that position. And they're going to graciously let us in, because that's our staff. They're going to graciously host us as board members. And yes, we're all partners, but we're still board members at the end of the day.
Commissioner Patterson.
Okay, so again, I respect everything everyone has said in the room as far as commissioners. I've already been giving a number of invites to come into, again, my programs and my schools by invitations already on my calendar. So again, I'm welcome, into the programs that I'm working in. There's only one school that I haven't stopped at yet. I have spoken to the vice principal there, who said basically the same thing. So these are invites. These are come and be a part of our school, come and be a part of our program, come listen, learn, and watch. And we're going to invite you in every opportunity we have. So I wouldn't even say so much just walking in the door. It's being invited in for a number of functions that they're having, that they would like my participation or would like me to come and watch.
So thank you, Commissioner.
Can I just say though that this conversation was really for all of us to have a protocol in place, so that it's clear both to the administration, our community, listening ourselves, how we all want to hold ourselves for a standard as a body of school visits. And all I'm asking for is that if you're visiting a school that someone else is a school liaison to, that you give them a heads up as a courtesy. This is not a barrier. You know, again, you will build your relationships with the principals you're all assigned to, and that's great. We want you to do that. That's why we have liaisons, so that you then become their best advocate for them. And the only way to do that is if you go visit schools and you build those relationships. And that's the only way to do that. So I just want to, you know, wrap that up piece with that discussion part 3 of 3A around the communications with school administration. So giving your principals a heads up. Yes, if they invite you, you know, I get invited to readings all the time, and I also get invited to schools that are not my schools. And all I'm saying is for myself too, to let whoever the board liaison know that I'll be going to that school for this purpose or whatever. Pre-COVID, there were lots of family events that were happening at the schools. And, you know, those were open to all of us to attend, to go hang out with families, do, you know, a game night, math quiz, you know, all those types of events that they were having. So those are always open to us as well. But, you know, these are when school's in session that we want to establish a protocol. That's all. If they invite you, that's one thing. We're talking about not popping up. Even if they say pop up anytime, we're asking that you do give them a heads up and you check in with them as a professional courtesy to them and their schedule and their staff. That's all.
But so it seems though that we've got two schools of thought here that we probably need to include in the protocol, because if we've got schools that are saying that you can just drop in, I think that we have to, you know, respect the fact that they're going, that if they have opened it up, then their schools are ready. You know, they don't have anything to hide. And so I think that, you know, both conversations is warranted and warranted to be in part of the communications protocol. So what was the next item, Beatrice?
The next item was the board question log, and it said, do we want to still utilize this format? That did come up potentially, President Elliott and myself, to look at maybe some different, better, manageable options, so that we know when commissioners submit questions and we have a better, clear timeline of responses, because this is not working. Should the log include a timeline component, which we discussed? How do we ensure enhanced responses? And then the next piece is remote versus in-person meetings. And President Elliott, we also, under that topic, discussed publicly discussing our different meeting formats, but also ensuring that it's defined in our website, on our social medias, what committee of the whole is versus a work session versus the board business meeting. And so that will be forthcoming in the future. But I'll turn it over to you. So it's the governor's new law. So Kathy just signed a new law extending the public officers law for us to meet via Zoom and any other elected body in the state of New York. Decisions on how meetings will be hosted moving forward is still needed.
So to what Commissioner Vice President LeBron has just said, I'll just open it up for conversation. I'm seeing Commissioner Powell is saying she doesn't want to see one protocol. Is Commissioner Powell, is that in relationship to the meetings? Or are you talking about communications?
I'm talking about the liaisonships. You know, I've been on the board over 20 years and no one's ever told me how to be a liaison to my schools. I think the conversation has been good and useful, and it falls under the heading of helpful suggestions, but I think we're gonna do our liaisonships the way we do our liaisonships. And if it doesn't result in a problem or a complaint, then who are we to tell other board members how to do their work?
Yeah, I think we concluded that we were going to do both of those strands. So yeah, we're going to do that. That'll be a part of the protocol. So with regard to the in-person and online meetings, let me get some thoughts about that. I like seeing you all in person. I'll just put that on the table. But there are times when I think that it's probably more effective if we do it on Zoom. So Commissioner Malloy, I'm going to just call on you. What's your thoughts on this?
I was about to raise my hand, so thank you. Yeah, I don't have a personal preference either way. I love the in-person opportunity, but then also I think we do accomplish a lot when we're on Zoom. From the perspective, perhaps from our board staff, I know that they have voiced that, they were so used to the Zoom protocol that it was much easier to get, people in and out of waiting rooms and just the live streaming, that it was less taxing, I guess, on staff to do online. But yeah, that was one reason I think I wanted to maybe bring it up, just to have a conversation as a board surrounding this. It's not my decision to make, it's the board's decision and where they want to go. So I'm really glad that both you and Vice President LeBron put this on tonight's agenda. So much appreciated. Anyway, I'm open to, during this emergency period of time, open to anything, but I will defer to my board colleagues.
Thank you, Commissioner. Vice President LeBron?
Yeah, that's an old hand, but I do want to, I do want to say this, and to the community watching, that, our committees of the whole, which we're going to go into conversations around meeting structures. Our committees of the whole, which are typically on Tuesdays, for me personally, this came up a few months ago, and the board did vote to continue to be in person, because we're asking our staff to be in person to teach. Then we should be meeting in person, and we should not be excluded from the same request that we're asking our staff to do. So in regards to our Tuesday meetings and our board business meeting and our calendar that we vote on every year for the rest of the year, so it's on our calendars, that we do those in person. But now there's new leadership, and we haven't had new leadership under the board in 12 years. So I just have to uplift that, because that is a long time. And so yes, Commissioner President Elliott and myself, we have some very lofty goals in terms of how we want to lead, but then also how we move the district forward as a collective body. And it's going to require lots more work sessions so that we can have these conversations as best as possible. And then I just want to say, I know that in the past, well, 8 years, not 12, but regardless, it's been a long time since there's been a new president around here. And then also, I don't particularly care to do things the way that the past has done it. If I'm honest, if I look at the outcomes, they're not that favorable for continuing past practices. So I'm personally not interested in that. I know that myself and President Elliott are a good collective blend of that, because she has her own strong views and I have my own, and we'll work through those. But it is a mixture of old and new. And, we hope that these work sessions are beneficial for us as a body as we move forward to work through these issues, because not having these work sessions, then we're making assumptions or carrying grudges, and we just want to move forward together as a body. So the work sessions, I say all that to say that the work sessions were not part of our calendar that was voted on. And it's really inconvenience for our staff, because our staff also have families. And this work session wasn't a part of my calendar. I'm still here. I can be here on Zoom, but I do have my grandchildren on days that I don't have board meetings, so that I can help my own children out with their schedule. So, I'm okay with the committees of the whole and the board business meeting and the calendar that was passed, meeting in person. And then any other additional meetings that we add, that we do them via Zoom.
Commissioner Malloy?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on that. I didn't express it really well before. Although I don't have a preference one way or other, whatever the board wants. I think having the work sessions via Zoom is extremely helpful, especially because, we're adding these meetings. They're not on the regular calendar. And, we all have lives and are juggling multiple things, and some of us literally right now. But I would say this, if we can help our board staff out in any way possible to lessen their workload, if this Zooming for these sessions does that, I think we've been successful. We've succeeded.
So it seems as if we want to, unless there's some objection, I'm hearing that we would continue with the in-person meetings for our business meetings, and our committee meetings and work sessions will be online. Commissioner Patterson?
Yeah, let me see, unmute. Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay. My thought is, and it's very simple, if we're going to request that, teachers be in the building, that we be in the building. So Commissioner LeBron, or Vice President LeBron, mentioned something, to that effect. So again, if we're going to demand that teachers be in the building, I think that we should be in the building for our meetings. And when they go virtual or, everything online, and then we go, the same
Yeah.
way as far as Zoom meetings.
Yeah, Commissioner Malloy? Thank you, Commissioner Patterson.
That was an old hand, sorry.
So, there are going to be some exceptions, like we have Commissioner Adams, who is on Zoom, for all of the meetings. And so there may be those times when there are exceptions that, we cannot be in person for whatever reason, but that we should be able to utilize the Zoom function. So are people okay with that? But there is a policy in terms of how many people can be on Zoom, right? Because Commissioner Malloy and I are going to be in DC. And is there a meeting on Tuesday evening?
There's a work session.
On Tuesday? Okay.
I'm going to be the same. I'll be returning on that Tuesday also. So I don't know if we'll have a quorum.
Are we talking about next Tuesday, the 25th?
Yes.
There is no meeting.
Oh,
Okay.
Oh, excellent.
There's no meeting. So,
All right.
well, yeah.
Thank you.
We took that in consideration because we knew you and Commissioner Malloy were going to be away at a conference.
And you're going to be away too, Commissioner Powell?
Commissioner Powell.
I'll be in the same place as you.
Oh, will you? We didn't know
Yeah.
that. Oh, okay.
Well, that's because NISBA's paying for it.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Okay, so what's the next item, Commissioner, Vice President LeBron?
The next item is the board meeting structure. So committee of the whole versus special meeting, committee of the wholes. Special meeting items on the COW agenda, we call it COW, committee of the whole. Speakers and resolutions, so I definitely want to get into that one in depth. And then inclusion of meeting and structure definition on the website to inform the public. So this is
Give me one at a time.
All right, so let's go right into the committee of the whole structure.
Yeah.
And so I just want to add this, that,
I'm going to let you take, Commissioner LeBron, I'm going to let you take a lead on that. I'm going to step
Okay.
out for a minute.
Okay.
All right.
So I just want to add, this one particularly came up because in December, a number of parents and community members wanted to sign up to speak around mental health supports for students. And because it was a finance meeting, our staff had been directed, and I'll say directed because they were directed to say that if it is not part of the agenda, that speakers from the community, parents included, could not sign up to speak. And, I had an issue with that personally because I was like, we've always allowed folks to speak. And apparently what was happening was that President White was opening special meetings before the committee meetings. And because he was opening those committee meetings, that did allow for speakers to sign up to speak on any subject at that time. And then that's not part of our bylaws apparently. And so our committee of the whole, our committee bylaws apparently say that speakers have to speak to the agenda items. And so there was a decision made that there would be some reversion, if you will, back to following the protocols and the bylaws. But that was not well communicated with the community. On the other hand, if we're going to enforce that to the community, then we have to enforce to the administration that committees are not for resolutions either. Really, the resolution should only be coming to the board during the board business meeting, because that is the purpose of the board business meeting. But what we do see happen is that we are, given resolutions or asked to put resolution on committee of the whole. And for me, I just feel like it can't be both ways. We can't allow the community to have these parameters and then not give the same parameters back to the administration. And so there still has to be a decision from you all and how you all want to proceed. But I certainly do not find it fair that we limit our community in that regard, but not the administration. So I bring that to you all because that was a decision made. And I will tell you all, when I found out, I was like, I'm a board member. I didn't even know that. And was this communicated to all board members? And it was not. It was not communicated to you all that, you know, this, we just kind of saw that on Tuesdays, whoever the chair was opening and closing the meetings now without that special, you know, special meeting happening in the first place. So any thoughts or feedback around that?
So the question becomes, do we want to do the special meeting or do we want to do the committee of the whole? And what is most advantageous to us? You know, and I'll just leave it at that, you know. Commissioner Malloy, you have a thought?
I thank you. Yeah. I think moving forward, that's certainly something to consider down the road, perhaps for next year. But I think because our calendar has already been put in place, I think remaining with committees of the whole might be in our best interest at this time until at least June. And then I think perhaps we have another conversation. Well, have a conversation prior to that because we have to do the calendar for next year. But maybe start making some decisions as soon as possible about after June, how we want to operate. I'm personally, it's whatever way the board wants to go. I see the benefits, advantages and disadvantages to either way. I like the committee of the whole structure, but that's all I've ever known because while I've been on the board. And so I never saw it any other way. I know there are advantages for I think our staff certainly appreciate the other method or other way, but I'm for either at this point. But yeah, I think moving forward, we'll have to, for next year at least, maybe look at something different. And if that lessens the number of meetings that we have or allows us to get things done. But yeah, I also wanted to highlight and just uplift what Commissioner LeBron was saying, because I hadn't thought about the resolutions, and I have noticed lots of resolutions at each of our committee meetings, and it seems to have developed into a habit almost now. And we never used to do that last year. And so it always is. I also want to just commend you, Commissioner LeBron, for talking about, you know, parents not being able to speak. I hadn't thought about it that way, and how that must feel so frustrating to our parents who just want to be heard. And but yet there are unexpected resolutions that we're voting on, and the disrespect that would be felt by parents in those circumstances. So thank you for highlighting that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Powell?
Yeah, so I don't think I didn't hear anybody suggesting that we not do committees of the whole, but this concept of our committee meetings being used to push resolutions through is very problematic. And it's a habit, as you said, Commissioner LeBron, Malloy, that needs to be curtailed. I do understand in the COVID environment that, you know, a lot of things have been happening, and I've been very forgiving about it personally, about having these resolutions pop up, but surely at this point, we've got to be starting to settle into a routine again. And the only way we're going to succeed at getting it into a routine is by, you know, just dropping the hammer and saying it's not going to happen anymore. You know, as of, I know, pick a date from this point on, there better be a really, really strong justification for adding a resolution. Because that also means if they're adding resolutions to our agenda, that means they're also probably haven't met the 48-hour rule, or barely met the 48-hour rule, but certainly didn't have materials pre-cleared. So a lot of times resolutions are hastily drawn, filled with mistakes. So there's a lot of reasons why we need to start to tighten up the discipline on this ship.
So I'm hearing that we want to be specifically committees of the wholes, but that I'm also hearing that there may be an exception to this, but rare exceptions. And so Marisol, I'll let you chime in here now.
Good evening, commissioners. Since October, what we've been trying to do is bring resolutions through the ESA committee. Unless there was an absolute urgency, and the request would usually go through the board president. So what we'd like to request, because we are still in a staffing crisis, and because we are moving with our SRSA and ARP funds, is that you allow us to bring resolutions to the ESA committee. Through that committee, we are following the 48-hour rule, and we are providing the data for those resolutions. And that's a process that I have been overseeing and working with Kalia. It's necessary for us to be able to bring some hiring resolutions, and we usually try to limit them to the Office of Human Capital resolutions for your consideration at the ESA meeting. Again, unless there's an urgency, and that will usually be brought up to the board president at a board officers meeting.
So is there any, what about, I'm thinking about facilities. Is there any reason why we would have to, that with regard to facilities, there may be an exception there, given this COVID environment?
Well, the only exception that I would see related to facilities is if there was an urgency. There was a building where we had a flood, and we did have to bring on a crew to conduct some work. So we did bring that as an emergency resolution. So for facilities, that would be the time when those would come up.
All right. Commissioner, Vice President LeBron?
Yeah, but so I just want to say, again, if you all want us to stick to this committee of the whole, and Commissioner Powell is right, and I did hear that Commissioner Powell does not allow resolutions on policy, and I was like, good for her, because they do try to stick them in other committees, and that's the type of, like, she's right. If there's just processes that are not being followed, but I want to go back to, we're not allowing community members to speak on outside items outside of the agenda. We should not allow you all to have resolutions. And let me just say this, you can say COVID environment, you can say HR. I have seen resolution. First of all, I've had the experience where y'all done hired people and then brought the resolution forth like a month later. So, and that person already started. So we have had that experience, because we have said to you all that we don't want to see those types of resolutions either. But second of all, there has to be a way to plan these things so that you're meeting these deadlines. That's why you have these deadlines. So I would not want to support any resolutions in any committees. And, you know, ESA has a new chair that Commissioner Powell did put in the chat, that the chair really is the one who is 100% responsible for that agenda. That is the biggest piece that they are, you know, maneuvering and managing through, and getting us to all be on the same page around that agenda. But the, you know, that I think it would be her call. But on the flip side of that, if it's only HR, then it should only be HR. If we see resolutions that are outside of HR, that are outside of emergency, then we should, as a body, say, no, we're not going to accept them. And President Elliott, you and myself in those leadership meetings, if they're going to tell us that they're bringing forth resolutions, should be screening those things and pushing back before it even makes it onto an agenda to say that this is acceptable or not acceptable. Otherwise, we're going to continuously go down this path where we've just allowed them to do this. And there has to be a place where we draw a line and a limit, because we just have to at this point. The other thing I would add is around the COVID dollars, and I get that COVID dollars are happening. And as the chair of finance, I'm still working through with the administration a way to identify those resolutions completely separate from all other resolutions, so that when we're voting on them and the community sees them in board docs, or any board member sees them, that they're easily identifiable as either state PRESA dollars or federal ARP dollars. And those, we could make exceptions for those depending on the timeline, because there's sometimes sensitivity, but not the way y'all be trying to make it seem, not in that regard. So that's my 2 cents on it. I just don't appreciate that we're telling community members they can't come in on committees of the whole and speak on items that may be an issue like transportation, because it's not on any of our agendas, but we're allowing the administration to bring forth resolutions that don't even have anything to do with hiring.
So what I'm hearing is that we're only going to accept HR resolutions through ESA, and if there happen to be any resolutions around some emergency, those are the resolutions that we're going to have to be presented. All other resolutions will be at the business meeting.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So ESA is the Student Achievement and Equity,
Your
and then
committee.
the resolutions are about HR. Don't we have an HR committee?
It will meet in April.
Okay, so it doesn't meet as frequently as the pieces. Okay.
Yeah, and I chair that committee, but and I don't like the fact that it's not meeting sooner, but that's another conversation that we can have at another time.
So Commissioner Simmons, of all of the committees, yours is the one that meets every month, and it meets 2 weeks before the board meeting. So that gives us a good spacing of time. If we do need to bring in any resolutions after or before the board meeting, they land on your committee. We can certainly have a conversation with you and go through what the urgency for some of these are so that you can make the final determination as to whether you'll allow them in your committee.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just I'm sorry, Madam President, just keep in mind that the president can call a special meeting. And if the president calls a special meeting on a day that happens to also be a committee of the whole, then, so be it. The resolution can be considered on the basis of the special meeting. But, that we do have to draw lines, boundary lines around our committee work.
Thank you. Any more conversation around this? All right. Thank you. What's the next item, Vice President LeBron?
So the next item is upcoming. We did talk about the inclusion of meeting structure definition. So I just want to reiterate, that's just defining to the community. This is a work session.
Yes.
We don't allow speakers at work sessions because we're working through things, but committees as a whole do allow for speakers. And as you all heard, it's speakers related to the items on the agenda for that committee. And then also board business meetings where our community can come in and sign up to speak about any topic at the board business meeting that they so choose for 3 minutes. So we are going to work with staff to update those definitions and pull it and also reference back to even our bylaws. So if folks are interested in learning more about where that language comes from and why we have those rules, that's where they are from. But up next is the upcoming work sessions. So we have a work session February 3rd, and the administration had some topics, but I'm also adding our board calendar, our budget calendar and our budget book, because that was something that was presented to us and not in a way that I would support in terms of making changes without us having a thorough advanced view of what the proposal to the changes are, why we should consider these changes, and what our current book looks like. So that will happen on February 3rd. And then the zone reconfiguration and the managed choice policy, those 2 topics have been added by the administration so that you are all aware. We are going to have a closed session on board staff department duties and expectations. And that will be a closed session because we as a board will be talking about our board staff. And so we will not do that publicly. We will do that in an executive private closed session, as we will be naming names, as they say in legal. And then a work session, wanted to have one specifically in the future on the president responsibilities and VP and leadership for the board to also give input. And then it also states monthly board work sessions, the first Thursdays as needed. So I think our staff alluded that we're going to schedule these work sessions on the first Thursdays of the month. And if we need them, we will use them. If we do not need them, we won't use them. And then President Elliott, it reminded me of one more thing from the very beginning in the communications piece. Hold on. Oh no, do not touch that, Cedric. One more piece is that I recognize that we had a meeting scheduled for Tuesday and we canceled that meeting. And historically, you know, our protocols are our staff sends out a press release saying that the meeting was canceled. And I just want to add that that is not the most effective way to alert the entire community. And that I would hope that the administration can start putting out both social media and a website update that our meeting has been canceled to alert the community, because they do come and try to watch and tune in. And oftentimes we're not communicating that the meeting was canceled beyond our own staff sending out that press release.
So Commissioner LeBron, Commissioner Powell just asked about, you know, the notion that, and I'll say this, Commissioner Powell, the previous board talked about a reduction in meetings. This board and in this leadership with the kind of items that we want to, and the issues that we want to address, it's going to be, I believe, necessary to do it in a work session. We're talking about, you know, a work session a month, and I'll be, you know, I'll come back to, you know, talk about some of the things that I'm interested in us doing. And I'll just give an example now. One of the things I think that we should look at is that this board should look at every school to find out what those needs are in every school and in every program. We should also look at what does our placement office look like and how do they contribute to the placement of our students in schools and how are they placed. So I think that this board needs to look at how do we support them school by school, and how do we make the decision of the associated resources that should go to every school to succeed. And so, you know, I think that we need to have that. Now, what Commissioner Powell also noted is in terms of the Dr. Jallo's report, and you know, what does that mean? What does that mean in terms of, you know, should we still, do we not have you cut back on some of the community of the whole meetings, or, you know, that certainly is up for discussion. And maybe where do we have these conversations? Maybe it is an ESA where we have these kinds of discussions, but there tends to be an agenda already established for that. And to your point, you know, maybe if we're going to cut down on meetings, then maybe we will have, you know, we may have to look at the current committee structure to be able to have these kinds of conversations, you know, because there's also financial implications to it. And of course, you know, instructional issues to it as well. So I'll keep that in mind, Commissioner Powell. So are we complete with the agenda for this evening? Let me just take a look what I have.
President Elliott, I think Vice President LeBron has her hand up.
Okay.
It did, and I'm gonna turn it down because we are complete.
I apologize. I have the agenda from actually board docs, and there's some other items that was there.
President Elliott, I would respectfully like to just kind of get some more information around ESA, because I'm hearing resolutions coming to ESA. Maybe we'll have some more of these discussions, and I want to make sure they're relevant to ESA. I don't want it to become something that takes us off the course of actually looking at student achievement. So getting that understanding will be helpful for me.
Absolutely. Commissioner LeBron, were you going to say something?
No, I was saying that we are done, but I do believe, I think we have an executive session that we need to go into actually to speak to our legal counsel. So we need to have a executive session to discuss matters related to the employment of a particular individual and other matters permitted by section 105 of the open meetings law, and to receive advice and counsel of the general counsel. And we do have a matter that the general counsel would like to speak to the board about tonight.
So let me get a motion for that, please. Are you making that motion, Vice President?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we're going to go into executive session, and that means that we will not come back out for, we will come out to close this meeting, but we're going into executive session right now. And we should be back momentarily. Thank you. So thank you. We're out of executive session and we have one resolution that we have to vote on before we close out this session, and that is resolution 377. Can I get a motion on resolution 377?
So
Motion.
moved.
A second?
I'll second. I'll let Commissioner Fowler make the motion.
All right. Any discussion on resolution 377? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0, I believe. Yep, 5-0. So can I get a motion to close this session? Do we need a motion for a work session?
Well, because it turned into a voting.
Yeah.
All right.
I would just motion and close it. Yep.
All
Doesn't
right.
hurt.
Thank you.
Motion.
Motion to close, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good night. Have a good evening.